Hi, I'm Jim Beute. I'm a hard luck nerd. This is my take on USS Wisconsin. It's an Iowa-class battleship. We build ships for the shipbuilding show in Norfolk every year, and it's an excuse to build things big and ridiculous. This is ours, and again, the show is at the museum where the USS Wisconsin is, and so we built it for that show. It's old school Wisconsin. It's the World War II version, so it's just covered in anti-aircraft gun mounts. They've modernized them over the 50 years they were in service, so there's missiles and helicopter launch pads and stuff like that on them now. So it's almost entirely snot built, built sideways, and that gives you kind of a satisfying look for the deck of it, where they've got that planked teak deck, so you can put the plates together and it looks good. And then the gray bulkheads next to it, you can use the interesting elements to make bulkheads, doors, and things like that. There's plenty of room under the hood there, so we motorize the turrets. All those little 5-inch mounts are on a central gear that oscillates back and forth, and that's interesting for the kids. They come up and they want to see things. The big guns will train and elevate just using regular power functions and IR stuff, and those are kind of interesting. Fun to build. It's neat to motorize things like this when you put a big ship together that has room for it. Trying to think what else. The hull shape worked on expanding on the snot technique. There's this technique where you take a small tile and then you put a small plate behind it, and you take advantage of that small, that tolerance, that gap that allows you to put the plates together and get them back off. You can get a little bitty angular displacement in each, and you make a big, long, gradual curve. So it's a pretty smooth hull for this scale, which is about 100 to 1. That was based on the gun barrels. We said, okay, that's got to look right. So the gun barrel is whatever it is, and everything else scales up and down from that. Sorry, I'm running at the mouth here. So that works out pretty well at that scale. Any questions?
Yes.
Concerns?
No, great job. Good job taking us through it. These ships are, awe-inspiring in real life, and I think you've captured so much of what makes these incredible. I love the motorized features. Talk a little bit more about kind of some of the detailing on top of the deck here. You've got so many different areas that you've captured here.
Yeah, okay, so again, everything is haze gray on these ships except for these. The only spot of color is there's flag bags, and those where the signal flags are on the ship. So I was just delighted to put something that wasn't gray on this ship. So there's a flag bag back aft and forward. Lots of antennas, smokestacks, all these little quad 40-millimeter gun mounts. It was fun to design the first one, but then you had to make 20 more of them, and that got a little tedious. And then these little 20-millimeter gun mounts, the little bitty things. There's just short of a zillion of those rotten things on there. So yeah, just mass production, put them out and make them. What else we got?
So you mentioned earlier the deck that you built, kind of studs not on top, that snot type building. So talk a little bit more about that technique for people who maybe aren't familiar with how that works and kind of how you can get that looking so nice.
Sure. I've actually got a prop over here that I do for the folks who come to the show. And again, instead of having a wall with a tile on top, you just turn it sideways, and for this scale, it's very satisfying. You get a gray bulkhead, and then the studs are again hidden by that tile for the bulkhead, and then you get the planking for the deck over top. And again, gives you a more of a satisfying look than if you had to stick it up there. Building on it, I got another prop here. This is how we make the hull so smooth. If you get the plate behind the tiles, and then you can bend that and make that work just like that.
So how long is this whole build?
It's about 9 feet long, which is it's a piece of work. Comes apart in 3 sections. The middle section, everything's straight and parallel and perpendicular, so that comes out as one piece. And again, like a horse, they're tricky on both ends. So the front end is all curvy and obnoxious, so that's its own piece, and the back end is all curvy and obnoxious, so that's another piece. And so 3 big pieces for the hull. And then the decks kind of come apart like a layer cake. Again, with a snot building, they just slide in and they attach with the studs to a big sideways piece that's under the hood there.
One of the most impressive parts of these battleships is always the big turrets on these. So talk a little bit more about the design of those. You got some angles in there, so I'm sure that's not always easy to capture.
If you're interested, I'll pull one off here a second here. I'll regret this. So there's using the angled plates, the ball joints make it easy to achieve the right shape by using a ball joint behind it, and then you can just put these things where they're at, because again, they're a very weird faceted shape for those things. For training and elevating, I wasn't smart enough to do it elegantly, so I just brute forced it. There's a bunch of reduction gears in here. The motor for elevation actually comes up through the deck and plugs into the turret, and that controls elevation. And then under the deck, there's the motor that controls this little turny thing here that gives us the training of the turret. So it's one way to skin the cat. I'm sure your viewers have got lots of other ways to do it, and that's the M in mock. It's my way of doing it. I'm sure there's other better ways, but this is mine.
For sure, yeah, and it looks like he was running very smoothly. So do all the moving parts work pretty normally for long periods of time, or?
Good question. They do now. Last night I learned that just because it would work a few times didn't mean that it would stand up to what a show does. So my friend Dan and I were in here last night learning new ways to pin things in so they didn't work themselves loose. So it's pretty sturdy now, but it wasn't last night.
One thing that some people might be surprised to see is some airplanes here on this, because it's a battleship. It's not an aircraft carrier. So kind of what's the story behind those on a battleship?
I guess, well, historically, the seaplanes, they can go up high, and they had a couple different kinds, but they would launch them off these catapults, and they're way up high, and they're the eyes of the fleet. You can see miles and miles and miles out there. And they would land in the water, and then this big honking crane back here would help them get them back on the deck and things like that. On the ships themselves, over the years, they modernized, and of course the helicopter came around, and they realized, hey, if I can land a helicopter vertically, I don't need these seaplanes anymore and these catapults and these cranes. So the modernized actual ships, if you ever get to go see one, do, because it's really neat. They've got a helicopter flight deck back there instead of those catapults for the old seaplanes.
And so I think you mentioned this ship still exists today, right?
Yep. This is Wisconsin. She's down in Norfolk. That's where we're at. So we get to go see it whenever we want. I think all 4 of these are floating museums someplace throughout the country. So yeah, go see them if you can.
So as you were working on this model, were you using kind of photos or blueprints of the real ship? How did you kind of capture it at this scale?
There's an old Revell model that's about 9 inches long that I had when I was a kid, and that was just perfect because I could say, okay, if the gun barrel is this big on the model and it's got to be this big in real life, I just multiply by whatever that factor was. So I just used that to kind of scale up the actual proportions to get the shape from that model. And then actually, we took a little trip out to the actual Wisconsin to look around and take some pictures of the deck stuff to get those details that make it look right and real.
Now we're going to look inside the ship for a little bit to show you more of those details that you can't see from the outside. So go ahead, and what do you have for us?
All right, to field strip this thing, first thing you do, you got to take off the big turrets, and those are awkward. The motors that drive the elevation actually have to come up through the deck. So each of the turrets I have to pull off individually at the start, and that lets us do some other stuff. And it takes a little while because the motors are plugged in to that drivetrain.
It looks like you handle it pretty expertly, though.
Well, no, I'm breaking things as I go, so I'll pay for this in a few minutes when I got to put it back together. But it's actually not too bad. It's given me enough grief. I've had to take it apart and put it together a few times. The top, the superstructures, the tops of the stacks and the masts are all kind of modular, so they all can just kind of pop off. And you've got various different little components that you take, and you can store them and transport them separately.
This is a good lesson for anyone building like this. That modular style is so important when you're bringing this to a show and transporting it.
Yep, that's a fact, especially if you drive a small car like I do, because this rotten thing won't fit anywhere. But there's certain, again, after a while you get used to it. And now, unfortunately, all these little 5-inch turrets, they plug down in axles that I need to pull those out because the axles just fit right into the oscillation distribution system down below. There's one gear that's driving all the 5-inch gun mounts, and my friend helped me figure out how to make that oscillate back and forth, and there's just one big long axle that we tap off from, and that gives us motion for all the 5-inch mounts. Pull those out.
And like you were saying earlier, they put a lot of guns on these things.
It's all about it. They had all that real estate, and back in the day, that's how you killed an airplane, is you threw a bunch of bullets in the sky, and they had as many gun barrels as they could doing that as fast as they could. So I'm a little bit embarrassed now. As I take this apart for your education, you're going to see all the junior varsity sketchy stuff under the hood that I hide beneath the veneer. So there's various components that, again, just slide in. And the top layers, got a couple more to go here.
This is great to see how this all comes together, though.
Yeah, and it's all one big rainbow build inside here. Everybody, you know, I couldn't use any gray inside because I knew I was going to use every single gray piece I have on the outside. So the decks are built up just like a layer cake. So you get one big hunk of deck there that can come off and goes like that on both sides. And taking it apart's quicker and easier than putting it together.
You really get a good idea of how parts intensive that deck building is with all of those plates in there.
Yep, and you'll see, yeah, some of the cheesy little things where it was too hard to actually, a lot of these little deck fixtures are actually built into the deck. Some of them I cheated and I set them on the deck after the fact because I had enough of them. All right, and now we'll pull off this other piece of the main deck. I'm sorry, though, the O1 level, not the main deck. So in the Navy, they number the decks up from the main deck and the O1 level, the O2 level, etc. The higher you go, the bigger number you get. Okay, so that's the deck. Down here, you can see there's a single, if I turn it on, there's a single oscillating gear that's driving this one axle back and forth. And we've just tapped off to that, so each side, so there's 10 of those 5-inch gun mounts, and that just lets them move back and forth, and the kids like to see the motion, and they say, ooh, gee, that's neat. So that's one way to do that, pretty easy. The forecastle is tricky, so when you're snot building, you gotta pin it into your build someplace. So we pin it in here back near midships. And as you put the forecastle on or take it off, you've got to put those motors through. So those motors that control the elevation are actually up in the gun turrets. And the whole forecastle comes off by itself, and you can see how much it flexes. That's that hinge building in snot, because the forecastle of these ships, it goes up gradually, but so gradually there's not really a good way to do it with a single Lego piece. So you got to cheat and get a very gradual vertical curve out of the deal.
I'm feeling nervous looking at how much that's flexing as you're carrying that around, but it look.
I know how to handle it now, but yeah, back in the day there were lots of exciting moments taking that apart and putting it together. Inside, again, rainbow build. There's lots of structure behind those curves to kind of discipline that and keep the hull where we want the hull to be to make it look right. Here's the central, the drivetrain that turns the front two turrets. And my friend Dan and I were in here late last night reinforcing this because these things were working themselves out. It worked great a couple times, but yeah, you learn. You gotta pin everything in. So there's the drivetrain that moves those trains the turrets side to side, and then again the elevating motors go up and sit in the turrets. I'm pinned in here pretty hard, but you can see the joint. Here's the front section. It'll take me 10 minutes to take this apart, so I won't waste your time with that. Front section slides off. Back section, same thing. There's a lot of things here that just come right off. They pop off the back. Seaplanes are not fixed on there. These catapults can just pop off. And the back, the fantail here, we kind of pin that in here, and this is the, I don't know, you can call it tricky or not, but hiding seams is the big job in the build. So there's a seam where this thing comes in, and we've done a pretty good job of just hiding that seam. And then back aft, you can see again a lot of discipline to keep those curves where you want them, and another drive motor for that rear turret. And that's probably more than you wanted to know about the inside of that. You can edit that down to about 30 seconds of useful footage.
Oh no, that's fascinating to see how that all comes apart, and also the contrast. Oh, you've got your helpful assistant over here.
Dan's the brains of the outfit. No, thank you very much. Yeah, being in a lug, you got lots of guys that are going to teach you how to do new things, and they're going to help you fix it when it breaks in the middle of the night. So we're good.
I love the contrast of the interior with the pink and all that color, and then all the gray on the outside.
Yeah, again, complete rainbow build. Every time we're building something big, we figure out, okay, what color's got to go on the outside, and I use every other color on the inside just to use it up and do that structure stuff.
So for me, what's always interesting with a model like this that's very large, you have movement in here, is kind of the planning process. So did you kind of sketch this out or use anything like that, or was this all just kind of throwing bricks together as you went along?
A lot of trial and error, and I've got a notion, and let's work on that notion, and we'll iterate. And okay, I knew there was going to be like a central distribution for oscillation, so I figured it out. I had another friend in the lug help me out with that. But yeah, more winging it than actual planning. Sorry. But you wing it and you reiterate and you wing it some more, and pretty soon it converges on a battleship.
Yeah.
So.
And I love that you can see it laid out on all these tables here. Just how much detail you have on top of that, and how much you pack in on top of the deck.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. It's a big ship, and as you said before, it's an awesome ship in real life. And trying to do it justice at this scale, you need a lot of bricks.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to dig even deeper into the build with us here. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks for tolerating that.